Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and I've been doing a few of these solo episodes. I've started inviting guests again. Life just got crazy, and so the recording slowed down, and then I wasn't inviting people on, and so we just haven't had guests for a little bit. But I talked to Obi Fernandez the other day. Hopefully he's going to show up here soon. I've got a number of other people that I've reached out to and invited onto the show. And so, we should start seeing those start to get lined up. I do not know what that looks like with the holidays and stuff, so we're just going to have to play that by ear. So you might get some more solo kind of stuff from me. But in the meantime, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to talk about the DHH keynote from Rails World this year. So Rails World was held in Amsterdam again. I went when they held it in 2023, and then last year it was in Toronto. Next year it's going to be in Austin, I think. Anyway, it's always interesting to see what is coming down the pipe for Rails and how that's going to affect those of us who work on Ruby on Rails apps. But there was a lot of stuff that he went through, and I kind of want to just dive in and talk through some of it. So the first thing that he talked about, and I think this is interesting, and it's something that I'm going to be getting into in a little more depth, I guess, on one of the other shows that I'm starting up called Single Player SaaS. And I've also been talking to some folks, and I'm working on pulling together a SaaS on Rails event. So SaaS is software as a service. And I get that a lot of people are really excited and bullish on AI, and I think there's some blend, right? Because you can offer a software as a service that's an AI-based service, and I'm building something around that. But at the end of the day, what I'm really looking to do is just talk through some of the things that were covered in his keynote. And it was funny because he starts out and he has kind of this, they're the little dogs from these memes, right? So you got this big dog, and he's like, well, back in the day, I would deploy my PHP application just by pushing new files up over FTP. Boy, that brings back memories. It was also kind of and in some ways it still is, the people still use FTP to push updates to WordPress, because I remember graduating from not PHP per se. I did do some PHP on some personal projects when I was in college. So that would have been early 2000s. And then, that was your deployment, right? You just put it on the server. If push really came to shove, then you would SSH in and you would tell Apache there was new stuff, or, restart it. But that was it, right? I mean, that was deployment. And so you'd run it locally, you'd make sure it worked, and then you'd push it up. And now he's saying, now it has to go through your whole CI/CD pipeline, and then it has to go and it has to, jump through all these hoops with your Kubernetes or AWS or Heroku or blah, 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 blah. And that's all kind of gross. And then, 15 minutes later, it may or may not deploy depending on what's going on. And you've got all of this extra stuff going on. And when he was talking about it, it was funny because I was sitting there. He didn't go so much into Kamal. He talked a little bit about Kamal Proxy, and I'll get to that a little bit later in the episode. But I've been deploying with Kamal for the last while, and I've had to do some, I wouldn't say it's extensive work on Kamal, but I've had to add some pre-deploy scripts and stuff to get it to do what I want. And basically what I've been doing, so I have a multi-tenant app, and on the tenancy, you can add a subdomain or a domain, like a full domain, a top level domain. And when you do that, there's not a good way to get that into your configuration for Kamal, because that's all in your deploy.yaml file. And I'm working on a better way to do it than what I'm doing. But right now what it does is it actually hits an endpoint on the server, and it just sends up an auth key. And then it gets the list of all the domains and subdomains, and it sticks them into that deploy file, and then it deploys them. And that works pretty good. Does modify my deploy.yaml every time I deploy if there are new tenants or new domains. But I'm not really marketing it, so it's not a routine thing. But I keep thinking that there's got to be a better way. And what I'm probably looking at, just on a side note, is Nate Berkopek who he does like scaling Rails and stuff like that. He's got a book on it and things like that. But he posted to Twitter a while back and he said something to the effect of, it'd be really cool if there was a system that you could use to basically do a Git push deployment or, a managed deployment like what Heroku does without having to use Heroku, because Heroku's freaking expensive. It's complicated and somewhat limited on what you can deploy with it, right? If you're doing anything outside of kind of the fundamental things that they offer, you have to go get a third-party service. You have to tie it in to provide that other thing and jump through hoops. And I can see where, if you've got the way that Kamal works, I could see building something on Kamal where you just say, I need Redis. And it says, okay. And so it deploys a Redis along with everything else. Right. And so then as long as there's capacity on the servers, whether you're using my servers or your servers, right? Because you could also set it up so it just, hey, here are the keys to my Linux or Linode account, or here are the keys to my AWS account, and then it just manages all that crap for you. And then you could get fancy, and I don't know how fancy I would get, but you could get fancy. You could have it monitoring the capacity on that stuff, and then if it's getting close to capacity, right, then it spins up another server for you and deploys more stuff with Docker onto those. But anyway, yeah, the deployment's way easier with Kamal. So that was one area. There were other areas of complexity he brought up, and I was just, I'm just sitting there going, yeah, I kind of live in that world, right? Where, and he said that there are these merchants of complexity, right? So they'll sell you all this stuff that you may or may not need. I think for some of the bigger enterprise customers, yeah, maybe some of these services make some sense. I would really dearly love, honestly, because there are open source systems like Grafana and or Kibana or whatever. I can't remember which one's which and what the open source limitations are and all that stuff. But you can set up other systems that are open source, and I don't see any reason why you couldn't deploy those too. I'd love to figure that out. Right. And so then what you do is you basically get a deployment toolkit that just gives you all the toys. But anyway, so then you can monitor what you need and get what you want. So anyway, yeah, I completely agreed with him on the complexity stuff. It just it feels like there's so much. And as I dive deeper and deeper into this area where I want to deploy my own services and software as a service. Oh, the other one he got onto was microservices. And I have to say that, so where I work now and some of the contracts that I've had over the last couple of years, yeah, they've got like a dozen services that you have to run. And I'm just not convinced that you need all of that extra orchestration to do the job. I think you could do a lot of it in Rails. And I don't completely, I guess, understand the allure of pulling it out and putting it in its own service. I think there are probably instances where some of that makes sense. But yeah, once you get to the point where you have to figure out orchestrating and deploying more than a couple of services, I don't know. I don't see the real draw there. But some of these bigger companies have done it. Maybe it helps isolate some of that data and stuff if you have to keep it private or things like that. I mean, I can think of instances where it does make some of that stuff easier because you have an extra layer between whatever's serving the front end and everything else. But for the most part, it just seems like it's overkill. So I'm with him on that. But yeah, like I said, if your instance is different and you think that you have a terrific case for having a microservice, no skin off my nose, right? You're the one that has to maintain it and deploy it. So yeah, but getting into the other stuff, the other piece of the philosophy with Rails that he pointed out was that, and I love this, and this is the reason why I love Rails personally, was he points out that it's supposed to be this broad toolkit for all the things you want to do to get modern web app out, right? And are there features that are still missing? Yeah, there are. But for the most part, it looks like they're figuring that out. So a few of them that he talked about, one of them was Markdown, right? He said that Markdown is basically the lingua franca of AI. He's not wrong. And so being able to work with and run through stuff in Markdown, translate things into Markdown, send it to the AI, whatever it sends back. If that's in Markdown, being able to render it makes things a whole lot easier. And there are more and more features and functions that are being outsourced to AI. And so that makes a whole lot of sense. Another one that he talked about was the offline functionality, right? Where your app can function offline. And especially if you're using something like, I want to say Turbo Native, but it's Hotwire Native. If you're using something like Hotwire Native, people expect it to work more or less like an app. And that means that if I open up my app and I'm not connected to the internet, I still can have some reasonable expectation that it's going to function. And yeah, not every app that I have on my phone works without internet. What's funny is some of them, it's like, this is a game, right? But it won't function because they can't run the ads. And so they don't want me to play the game unless they can profit off of me or something. It makes a lot of sense there, having that functionality there as well. And apparently Joe Mazzotti and I think it was Rosa, what's her name? I think I can pull it up here. Anyway, there was another talk. Yeah, Rosa Gutierrez. They spoke about some of these functionalities with the different options with, the offline mode and stuff like that. And so that's exciting, right? Because, you can definitely make things work that way. Another one was the notifications. So the push notifications from your Rails app, which is a critical feature, in my opinion, if you're running a software as a service or anything that, you need to let people know about. One other one that I thought was really awesome was the active job continuations. In other words, you can basically run your deployment and it doesn't have to sit around and wait for this long running job to finish. Instead, it can stop and then it can pick up where it left off, which is awesome. Very, very exciting. Lexi is the new action text. So, where before you used tricks, now it's using Lexi. And yeah, again, just the capabilities there with a better rich text editor and the options that you have with Markdown. That's exciting. That's very exciting. And finally, the active record tenanting and the Kamal geoproxy stuff, where you can push now your stuff out to the edge. And this is something that I've kind of been looking at off and on for a while is, I don't think it's terrible to expect people to hit a server in one or two locations around the world. Can also see where it would be really nice to be able to just serve things faster, right? Where if you're in Europe, you're getting your data from Europe. And if you're in the US, or North America, you're getting the data from North America, right? And so it's faster because it doesn't have to travel as far, and very, very exciting stuff there. So overall, I'm really excited. It looked like they're dropping support for stuff. I can't remember all the things. I didn't really take that involved with notes, but just making sure that it's focused on the forward-looking stuff was really, really exciting. And then he showed off Omarchi, and I'm glad that he said how to say it, because I've just kind of been reading in my head and I was never quite sure how to say it. But Omarchi, it was funny because he says, yeah, when I switched over, I started using Ubuntu, and that's kind of where I've been at. I just installed Ubuntu. So my journey there is it kind of looks a little bit like where he ended up, not entirely. So for work, they issued me a MacBook Pro. And anyway, I was chatting with some of my coworkers and they were like, and I was complaining because I was like, I feel like I'm a little bit lost in Apple Prism a little bit, right? Where I only get what I can get on the Apple, and I don't have as much control over my stuff. And, sometimes these couple of things just don't work as seamlessly as they do on Linux. Because I have a Linux machine under my desk that I've been running Ubuntu on. I installed KDE on it because the GNOME interface just isn't my favorite. KDE really isn't either, but it was closer to what I was used to. And so anyway, at work, what wound up happening was they said, well, you can request a Linux machine. So I did. And so the laptop I have now is a Linux machine running Ubuntu. And I was chatting with the other guys at work that are using Linux, and they were basically saying, yeah, well, we got rid of GNOME and we're running i3. And i3 is one of those, I can't remember exactly how they describe it. Effectively, if you watch the video, he shows off what he's doing there. I think he's using Hyperland. Yeah, i3, it says it's a tiling window manager. And so what happens is you hit the magic keys and it'll open up a terminal, and the terminal takes up the whole screen. And then if you hit the magic key again, and it'll open up another terminal, and it'll split it. It'll just automatically split the screen in two. And, there are, hotkeys for saying, split it horizontally, split it vertically, make this take up, and so you can affect the layout, and then you have different workspaces that you can move through. I had some issues with i3, and so I switched to Sway. And Sway is based on i3, but instead of using the X11 Windows Manager, it uses Wayland. And I think Hyperland does the same. But yeah, he was showing it off, and it was like, oh yeah, that's a lot like what I'm doing. I'm still learning the ins and outs of Sway, but I have to say that it's really, really nice. And the fact that he's worked out over the last few months all the kinks with, hey, this works nice with this, works nice with this, right? Because with Sway, I've had to figure out, oh, how do I get it to, and I still don't have it quite working, where it's, okay, if I walk away for 5 minutes, I want it to turn on a screensaver. Well, it still doesn't do it. There's something wrong with my configuration. It just stays on. I mean, nothing breaks. But, I have to figure out how to configure that myself. So I have to find the open source program that works with Sway that will do all that stuff, right? If I want the machine to go to sleep like it is now, I actually have to put a command in, or I have since configured a key combo that will just tell it to go to sleep. But it's, the fact that he's kind of figured all of that out as far as, this is how we get all the niceties with managing stuff. And then you can manage your windows with just from your keyboard. I mean, you can use your mouse, so you're not locked off your mouse, but then I can just use the mouse for the places where it makes sense for me to go, okay, I got to click on this web page. I got to click this button. I got to click this link. I got to work through this thing. And so I'm really looking forward to trying it. One other thing that I saw on Twitter was, my laptop, my personal laptop right now, I really want to try out the Framework One's laptops. And that's what he showed off at Rails World. The thing that appeals to me about the Framework laptops is that if I want to upgrade them, I can. And that's been an issue that I've had with laptops for a long time, is you're just kind of stuck with what you get. Some of the PC laptops give you some options, right? You can, you pull out the RAM and put new RAM in, and you can pull out the hard drive and put in a bigger hard drive. But the Framework ones are built for you to be able to do that, right? So if you want a nicer keyboard's modular, you can pull it out. If you want a different screen or a better screen, you can swap it out. The RAM, the hard drive, all of that stuff is made for you to be able to pull it out and put new in that's better. And so you can get a base model, and then you can upgrade it as you go. And so I'm looking at trying that on Twitter, because I've got a couple of Mac Minis sitting over here, but they're old. And so they won't upgrade to the latest Mac OS. I have a Mac Pro up in my closet over there, and it's like a 2012, I think, Mac Pro. And apparently people are installing Omarchy on these older Apple devices, and it's working fine. And so I'm really excited about some of those options as well. And then the other thing that it got me thinking about as he was talking through some of the things at the end of his talk was, he was saying, yeah, and you can just run all this stuff at home and blah, blah, blah. It does occur to me, and I know Dave Kimura does this. Dave, who used to be a host on Ruby Rogues, he actually has a server rack and servers in his house, and he hosts all of his crap out of his home. And I mean, I have fiber internet here, and I don't see any reason why if I put a rack in here somewhere, or, even with some of the older machines I have, I put Omarchy or something on them, or just installed like just a Ubuntu server on them, maybe I could host some of the stuff that I do here in my house and run some of the stuff locally, right? Even if it's just CI/CD or things like that. I think it'd be interesting to see if I could make all that work, and then, not have to pay a data center bill or a cloud bill to host my crap. Now, if the internet goes down at home, then, that's what you get out of some of that other stuff, is you have better guarantees that it'll stay connected and stay on, right? As opposed to here, where the power could go out or whatever, or my ISP could have a hiccup. But anyway, at the end of the day, I'm pretty stoked about some of the possibilities and about reviving maybe some of this other hardware and being able to run stuff that way. I don't know that Omarchi is approachable for like my kids, or my wife. They're pretty used to Windows, but just having those options where it's like, oh, okay, I can offload some of the work to some of these other machines, or things like that. I think there's some real options there. So I'm pretty excited about some of the some of the things. But yeah, he installed a Marchi in like 4 minutes and had a Rails app running, a new Rails app, build a blog. He had that running in another minute or two. And so, just the idea of that is pretty exciting. I am not a NeoVim user, so I would just have to figure out how to run Emacs or something on there. But a lot of these tiling systems, they'll run other stuff. So even if I wanted to run Cursor or VS Code or something else, I probably can, because it'll run the GUI apps. Anyway, yeah. So I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know that there's a whole lot more for me to dive into there. I'm definitely going to be watching some of the other stuff on the YouTube playlist. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about the stuff that's coming, especially in Rails 8.1. They released Rails 8.1 beta. I think I heard that Rails 8.1 was actually released. Yeah, I thought I got an email that said that it was. I'm looking right now. Yeah, it was released Friday, October 20th, about 2 weeks ago. So as we speak, it's out. And it's got all of those awesome features, so you can run your CI locally. You've got your Markdown stuff. I'm kind of curious now, just clicking through some of this stuff, see what. So they have structured events. I'm not sure what that is. I think it's related to the notification stuff. But yeah, all in all, I'm pretty excited about what's there. And I'm looking at diving into some of the other features. If you're interested in Rails 8.1, it's definitely worth watching, because you can see what's there kind of in broad strokes. And if you're, here we go. This is better. So structured event reporting it's essentially logging, it looks like. And so, yeah, you've got that going on. But yeah, then you've got the local CI, you've got the Markdown rendering. You can deprecate associations. That's cool. And Kamal doesn't require you to have a local or a remote registry like Docker Hub anymore. I think if you have multiple people doing deployments, your certain level of automation and stuff, you probably still want the Docker Hub remote registry stuff. Yeah, where I'm at, where I'm the only person deploying, I could see that making sense, where, maybe I don't use Docker Hub anymore. I know it slows it down because it actually has to go talk to the server up in the sky and get stuff and make it all go and then come back. Right. It has to talk to it, and then it has to push up the image, and then it deploys from that image. So anyway, that's pretty much everything that I have to talk about on this. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off as soon as I do my picks. A few other things that I wanted to quickly mention. So I did mention that I'm looking at doing the single player SaaS podcast, where I'm talking about building software as a service. Just to be kind of clear on that, it's not going to be a podcast that is, you have to stay solo all the time. I mean, I anticipate actually growing and building my team, but I think the tooling and everything else that's out there these days, you can go a lot further on your own and have it make sense. And so that's what I'm looking at is, hey, here are some of the things that I'm figuring out that I can do while I'm still not sure that I can afford to hire a person. And then, hey, I've decided I need to hire somebody to do this stuff. And so this is what I'm doing to get there. But I could also see the potential of, hey, I built an AI agent that does this particular thing for me. So anyway, definitely that's one thing. And then I'm getting ready to launch the Ruby tip of the day and Rails tip of the day. Those will be podcasts, so you can just subscribe on your podcast player. They're not out yet, but they will be soon. And then I'm going to have video companions for each of the podcast episodes, so you can actually go and see them in action. And there will be some level of freemium to that. So you'll probably get a couple of episodes a week. for free, and then you'll get a couple more that are paid every week. I'm hoping to have a daily tip, and then, you get like 2 or 3 for free every week. And then the other 3 or 4 every week, right, are part of the subscription. And I'm going to keep that pretty affordable. I want to put something together that's kind of like Go Rails or Railscasts or Drifting Ruby as well. But what I want to do there is more in the vein of the SaaS stuff. So it's not, hey, this is this feature in Ruby or Rails, and this is how you do the thing. What I want to do is I want to say, hey, I am building this service, right? And so I need this feature. And so here's how I'm building it with Rails, with the latest, whiz bang that's in Rails. And so one of the things that I'm looking at building is a system for people to follow the legislative process in Utah, right? And then I think it's probably something that I could expand fairly easily into other states. But then the push notification stuff that just came out in the keynote, right? I could see saying, so now people can subscribe to get push notifications off of their app. And so if something changes, right, it'll pop up in their browser and say, this bill's text changed, or, the something else, the sponsor withdrew, or, it's going to committee. It's just been assigned a committee hearing. Right. And so then, you have to go show up at the Capitol or get on Zoom and test, if you're going to testify and say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea because of this, or, hey, I think this is a terrific idea and I'm an expert and here's why. And so anyway, so you can see that if I put these features in, then I can show people, hey, here's a real world example that people are going to actually be consuming that give you the thing. But the other thing is that I could then also talk through some of the features that I'm building in and the reasons why I'm doing it that way. So for example, the last handful of applications I've built, I've deliberately not used Devise. And the reason is between the authentication generator, a little bit of help from AI, and just some basic Rails know-how, I can get the functionality I need without having to figure out how to shoehorn stuff into the process with Devise. So, just stuff like that. So anyway, so those are the things that I've got coming. I'm probably going to get those rolling here within the next week or so. And then you can sign up for a discount as kind of a launch / Black Friday deal. I'm not sure how often I'm going to really offer discounts, but if you're willing to back me early, then I am willing to give you a deal. And the other thing is that there are a handful of people that signed up for like the book club and some of the other coaching that I did last year in 2024. And so those people are going to get a killer deal discount because they backed me early. And so if you're looking at, okay, well, what else could he come out with, as far as, maybe some of this, pre-work on Kamal so that you can get the deployment you want or things like that, then because like I said, I'm looking at building software as a service in a number of areas, and I'm looking to integrate AI into them. And so if you want to see how I'm building that stuff, I'm going to be putting out videos on it. So anyway, that's a way to keep up. Let me do some picks and then I will jump off. So my first pick, I always do a board game pick. I learned a new game last night. It's called Tower Up. It's a relatively simple game. And what you're doing is you're trying to construct buildings in a town. I think we played it in like 45 minutes. There were 4 of us playing. And that was with one of us getting a phone call saying that his son had been in a car accident and nobody was hurt, right? But he stuck around just long enough to finish because his wife was telling him, no, you don't need to be here. But as soon as the game was over, he's like, I'm going anyway. So so we got distracted in the middle of it and we still finished it in like 45 minutes. It's 2 to 4 players. Board Game Geek says it's a weight of 1.87. And the way that it works is you have a map and then you've got different ways of getting bonus points when you score or that you score on. So when we played, if you were in 4 buildings on lakes, then you got a score token. If you were in 1 building of each color, and the colors are white, gray, brown, and black, then you got a score token. And then if you had 5 buildings that you were in that were all connected to each other, so you could have them in a line, you could have them all clustered together. Mine were kind of all clustered together when I did it. Then you get a token. And if you're the first person, you get 7 points. If you're the second person, you get 5 points. Third and fourth person each get 3 points. And when you build a building, you can only build where there isn't a building. But when you build, you have to add on to every other adjacent building that exists. And so if you're playing on a spot that has a white next to it and a brown next to it, and you can't play the same color next to each other. Anyway, so if you play, if there's a white and a brown that are adjacent to a space, you have to play gray or black in that space, but then you have to put a white on the white building and a brown on the brown building. But then any building, including the one that you just built, that you want to build on, or that you put a token on, you can put your roof, you can put one of your roof pieces on. And at the end of the game, and when you put your roof piece on, then you move the little tractor. You've got 4 tractors that are on tracks. You move the tractor up. And so then you get scored based on where all of your tractors are. You get points based on how many of your roofs are on top of however many buildings. You can max it out at 7. Also, if you move all of your tractors past a certain point, you get an extra turn, and you can do that a bunch of times. But that's basically the whole game. And so then you just score it up based on the tokens you got for completing the missions, what the position of your tractors, how many of your roofs are showing, and then you win or not. And it says that ages 8 plus can play it. That's probably fair. And 2 to 4 players. We played it with 4. I think it's probably good with 4. There was a flip side of the board where you could play 2-player, and it was a smaller board. And there are a bunch of different missions. So for the replayability, right, you get a different game because you're trying to score those on those missions differently. Anyway, I'm going to pick that tower up. And then I don't know if I picked this last time or not, but I'm going to pick a movie that my wife and I went and saw. It's called Truth and Treason. It's a World War II movie, which is always a winner for my wife. And so we went and saw it. It's by Angel Studios, and we're Angel Guild members. And so we got tickets because we're Angel Guild members. We get free tickets. Anyway, it's a story of these young men who basically are running around. I think it's Hamburg. But they're running around and they are typing up on typewriters, right? Because whatever. But they're typing up these anti-Nazi leaflets, and then they're going from building to building or putting them on cars, right? And so they're sticking them in people's mailboxes and explaining, the evils of the Hitler regime. And, so it's their story as to how they get into it, which is that one of their friends, who's a Jew, gets disappeared by the SS. And so, it gets them going to fight the regime, the Nazi regime. And, and so it's it gets a little intense because you're worried about him getting caught. And then after he gets caught, what happens. And anyway, it was really good. We enjoyed it. And so if the World War II, do the right thing kind of movie appeals to you, then definitely go see it. Just keep in mind that it doesn't really have a happy ending. But it's right up our alley because I'm not sure exactly what my deep feeling of connection is with World War II, because my grandparents or my grandmother left France before Germany invaded France. She left a few years before Germany invaded France. So I don't know people that fought in World War II. Well, my grandfather fought in World War II, but I think he was in the Pacific. He was in the Navy. Anyway, but I just feel this strong connection for whatever reason as part of my history, and my wife does too, but her grandfather was in the Air Force in Europe, and her mother grew up for several years in Germany. So she has that strong connection there as well. And so, a lot of these is like, oh, wow, these are just amazing stories of people, doing the right thing and risking their lives. I don't feel like I'm put in a position where I risk my life. I mean, I've stood up for what I believe, and I've had people try and punish me for it, but nobody's tried to kill me for it. So, but I still identify strongly with these kinds of stories. So anyway, it's called Truth and Treason, and definitely go check it out as well. And yeah, those are my picks. Thanks for listening. Until next time, Max out.